a long-distance relationship becomes truly viable and thus worth pouring your finite time, emotional energy, and often money into only when several non-negotiable elements are unmistakably present from both sides. First, mutual intentionality. You must feel, without constant reassurance seeking, that this person is genuinely open to a real relationship at this stage of their life. It's not about certainty that they're the one forever, it's the quieter, deeper sense that both of you are choosing to invest because you want something substantial, not just attention or validation. Second, genuine momentum. The connection doesn't stall in an endless loop of goodnight texts and nostalgic "remember when we met" conversations. Instead, it gathers speed. You're learning new things about each other, deepening emotionally, laughing more easily, fighting small fights, and repairing faster. Third, concrete evidence of forward motion toward closing the gap, even temporarily. This means actual trips are planned, dates are in calendars, flights or trains are booked or at least budgeted for. There is a shared horizon. I'll see you in 6 weeks, then again in 10, then let's talk about one of us moving in 18 months. Without that light at the end of the tunnel, you're not bridging distance, you're sustaining a fantasy. Finally, communication that is steady and proactive rather than reactive or convenience-based. You're not left guessing whether you'll hear from them today, you simply do, because both of you have decided this matters enough to protect and prioritize. When these 4 pillars are solidly in place by the 3 to 4 month mark of consistent daily contact, the relationship has proven it can survive the inherent disadvantages of distance. If even one is missing or shaky after that much invested time, you're almost certainly in an expensive, exhausting situationship that will drain you without delivering the future you secretly hope for. The difference between a long-distance situationship and an actual relationship is stark, painful to confuse, and lies entirely in the presence or absence of shared intention and follow-through. A situationship feels intoxicating at first: fireworks on FaceTime, marathon text threads, a visit that feels like the best week of your life, followed by a slow fade into radio silence once real life resumes. You rationalize the sudden drop-off as they're busy, time zones, work is crazy, but the truth is simpler: they wanted a holiday romance with an expiration date, not a partner. The chemistry was real, the sex was electric, the conversations flowed, yet the moment the plane took off, so did their effort. You become a fond memory they occasionally revive when boredom or loneliness strikes, not a priority they restructure their life around. An actual relationship, even across continents, never lets the energy die like that. Both people treat the connection as something alive that requires daily oxygen. They don't just reminisce about the last trip, they're already planning the next one, blocking dates, comparing fares, discussing who will take time off work. Communication is consistent because neither person views the relationship as a side quest, it's part of the main storyline of their week. Exclusivity is discussed naturally and early, not because someone is possessive, but because both recognize that pouring this much emotional energy into someone far away only makes sense if you're both off the market. In a situationship you're left guessing, waiting, overanalyzing response times. In a real relationship you simply know where you stand, because both of you have chosen out loud and repeatedly to keep choosing each other despite the miles. One is a beautiful mirage, the other is hard, deliberate, exhausting, and worth it. Long-distance relationships carry a built-in intoxication that proximity almost never matches, and understanding why is crucial before you mistake the drug for love. Distance strips away the mundane friction of real life: no unwashed dishes, no morning breath, no having to choose between seeing them or your friends on a Friday night. What remains is pure, concentrated idealization. Every call is scheduled when both of you are rested, groomed, and in a good mood. You're performing the highlight reel version of yourselves: no traffic jams, no bad days at work bleeding into the relationship, no silent evenings scrolling on the sofa because you've already said everything there is to say that week. The scarcity of time creates artificial urgency. Every "I miss you" lands harder because the obstacle feels external and romantic rather than internal and solvable. This dynamic is catnip for avoidant personalities. They get to be warm, attentive, even vulnerable, safe in the knowledge that no one can suddenly show up unannounced or demand daily integration into their routine. Anxious partners, meanwhile, thrive on the constant ache of separation because it mimics the push-pull they subconsciously believe love requires. The barrier itself becomes erotic. "We can't be together right now" flips into "this must be epic if we're willing to fight the odds." Neurochemically, your brain reads the distance as forbidden fruit, flooding you with dopamine every time a notification pings. The same person who might feel perfectly pleasant, or even annoying, on a third local date suddenly seems extraordinary because your mind has endless empty space to project perfection onto them. Worst of all, the setup lets you fall in love with a fantasy avatar who bears only a passing resemblance to the real human who will eventually maybe share your physical space, your bills, your flu season, and your Netflix queue. Distance doesn't just delay reality, it actively distorts it. The scarcity mindset is the silent killer of good judgment in long-distance dating. When your local dating life feels barren, no promising matches on apps, no sparks at parties, no one in your social circle who excites you, your brain enters deprivation mode. Any crumb of attention starts to look like a feast. Suddenly a charming person from another city, state, or country slides into your DMs or matches with you online. The first few conversations are electric. They ask about your day, remember details, send voice notes, laugh at your stories. Dopamine floods in. For the first time in months, you feel seen, desired, alive. Without noticing, you begin rearranging your entire emotional world around this new source of validation. That's when the trap snaps shut. You stop swiping locally because no one compares. You decline invitations to social events because you're saving energy for late-night calls across time zones. You pause your own search, convinced this distant person is the rare exception you've been waiting for. Meanwhile, they haven't paused anything. They're still dating in their city, still living their full life, while you've quietly placed your happiness on hold, tethered to the rhythm of their notifications. Your mood now rises and falls with response times. A delayed text feels like abandonment, a quick reply feels like proof you're special. You've handed your emotional remote control to someone whose daily reality you barely know. This dynamic is especially lethal because distance hides red flags. You can't see how they treat waitstaff, how they act around friends, whether they disappear every weekend to party or see other people. All you have is the curated version they choose to beam across the miles. Scarcity convinces you that protecting this fragile connection is more important than protecting yourself. Keep dating locally, even if it feels forced, until the long-distance person has proven, through consistent action and booked flights, that they're willing to match your investment. Otherwise, you're not building a relationship, you're starving yourself at a mirage. The timeline for the talk in long distance is far shorter than most people allow themselves to believe, because the emotional stakes rise exponentially faster than in local dating. In a normal proximity-based connection, you can happily date for weeks or even months without defining anything. Coffee turns into dinners, turns into sleepovers, and exclusivity often emerges organically through sheer time spent together. Distance removes that luxury. When you're already investing hours of daily calls, voice notes, good morning texts, and planning expensive flights, you're operating at the intensity of a committed relationship without any of the safeguards. 0 to 1 month is the discovery phase, chemistry checks, consistent communication tests, seeing if the spark survives the first separation. Future talk should stay light. I'd love to see you again soon is enough. By the 1 month mark of near daily contact, however, the next visit should at least be floated. If 30 days pass and neither of you has mentioned concrete plans to reunite, someone isn't serious. Between 1 and 3 months, the relationship enters the decision zone. If you're now speaking every day, sharing vulnerabilities, falling asleep on FaceTime, and structuring your week around their schedule, it is not too soon to clarify intentions. Waiting longer than 90 days to discuss exclusivity, visit frequency, and long-term feasibility is self-sabotage. At this point, you've already given more focused emotional energy than many local couples give in 6 months. 3 months of daily investment without mutual acknowledgement that you're intentionally building something is the universal statute of limitations on ambiguity. Past 3 months, silence on the future isn't shyness, it's strategy or indifference. You're no longer taking it slow, you're volunteering for unpaid emotional labor in a connection that has quietly decided not to progress. The kindest thing you can do for yourself is treat the accelerated emotional timeline as reality, not pressure. Asking where this is going at 8 or 10 weeks isn't rushing, it's catching up to the depth you've both already created. Bringing up the future in long distance doesn't have to feel like an ultimatum or a desperate plea. The secret is framing it as a calm statement of self-respect rather than a question born from insecurity. Most people wait far too long because they fear sounding needy, but by the time you're speaking every day and planning your first or second visit, the conversation is overdue. The goal isn't to lock someone in forever, it's to confirm you're both spending scarce emotional resources on the same goal. A strong, non-anxious way to open it sounds like this: I've really been enjoying where this is going. Getting to know you like this has been the highlight of my weeks lately. I know long distance isn't anyone's first choice, and it takes real effort, time, money, energy. For me, that kind of investment only makes sense if we're both intentionally exploring something deeper. I'm not asking for promises about forever, I just want to make sure we're on the same page about treating this as something with potential, rather than just seeing where it goes with no real direction. How are you feeling about that? Notice what this does: it leads with appreciation, owns your standards, my time and energy are valuable, clarifies your intention without pressure, and invites them to match it. You're not asking, do you like me enough? You're saying, I like you enough that I need clarity to keep investing at this level. That single shift turns the talk from a vulnerability contest into a mature alignment check. If they respond with enthusiasm and specifics, dates for the next trip, thoughts on exclusivity, curiosity about closing the gap eventually, wonderful, you're building something real. If they deflect, change the subject, or give vague I'm just going with the flow answers, believe them. That's not fear, that's lack of matching investment. Thank them for the honesty, pull your energy back, and reopen your local options. Protecting your heart isn't neediness, it's the bare minimum requirement for letting someone this far in while they're still, literally, far away. By the 3-month mark of consistent, daily contact, the difference between a promising long-distance connection and a dead-end situationship reveals itself in unmistakable patterns. Green flags shine when effort flows both ways without scorekeeping. They text first as often as you do, not just when their evening is empty or their ex posted a story. When you float a visit date, they don't reply sounds fun, and leave it hanging, they open their calendar, check flights, and counter with options before the conversation ends. Communication feels like a warm current rather than a leaky faucet, steady, predictable, woven into the fabric of their day because you matter that much. They ask specific questions about your world, remember your stressful meeting, celebrate your wins unprompted. Exclusivity arises naturally, I'm not seeing anyone else because I don't want to, I'm all in on this. Most telling of all, they speak openly about the distance as a problem to solve together, budgeting for trips, brainstorming holidays, even tentatively exploring whose career could bend. You feel pursued, not tolerated. Red flags, conversely, cluster around avoidance and inconsistency. Radio silence descends the moment they're back in their real life. An incredible 5-day visit dissolves into 3-word replies and unseen stories. Weekends bring a flood of attention when they're lonely, weekdays nothing while they're swamped. Every attempt to pin down the next trip meets vague optimism, we'll make it happen soon, that never materializes into booked tickets. Bringing up exclusivity triggers discomfort, jokes, or subject changes. You catch yourself lowering expectations just to keep the peace, rationalizing their flakiness as they're just not a big texter when the truth is simpler, you're convenient, not chosen. The clearest danger sign is the knot in your stomach when you consider asking for more. You already sense the answer won't match your investment. Green flags make the distance feel temporary, red flags make it feel permanent. Trust the feeling. The honeymoon compartment illusion is the most seductive and destructive lie long-distance relationships tell themselves. A single week together, carefully curated, no responsibilities, endless sleep, sex, and sightseeing feels like proof of compatibility. You wake up giddy, wander foreign streets holding hands, discover shared tastes in food and music, stay up until dawn talking about childhoods. By the flight home you're both floating, convinced you've glimpsed what daily life together would be. You haven't. You've experienced the relationship equivalent of a destination wedding, beautiful, expensive, emotionally heightened, and utterly detached from reality. Real life isn't day 3 of vacation. Real life is day 57. One of you has food poisoning, the other has a deadline, the laundry is piling up, the dog just threw up on the carpet, and you still have to decide whose turn it is to cook. It's deciding whether to watch your show or there's after a 12-hour workday. It's the slow Wednesday when you've already exhausted every interesting story and now you're just 2 people sitting in the same room, quietly scrolling. Long distance lets couples stack honeymoon after honeymoon, each visit a pressurized bubble of novelty and makeup sex, while the unsexy competence of everyday partnership never gets tested. Many pairs survive years this way, flying in for long weekends of curated bliss, then retreating to their separate realities convinced the magic is sustainable. The moment one person finally relocates, the spell shatters. Suddenly the person who felt like home across an ocean feels like a roommate you barely know. The quirks that were cute on a 5-day trip become infuriating when repeated daily. The emotional muscles required for conflict resolution, compromise, and boredom tolerance were never exercised because distance excused you from needing them. What you fell in love with wasn't a partner, it was a vacation version of a person who never has to share a bathroom, a budget, or a bad mood at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. Distance doesn't just postpone real life, it actively prevents you from discovering whether real life together is even possible. By the time you hit 3 to 4 months of steady, daily investment, the fog finally lifts. You either feel the quiet certainty of a shared future or the slow dread of one-sided hope. If the relationship is truly viable, the evidence is no longer subtle. You have the next 2 or 3 visits locked in calendars, tickets purchased or dates non-negotiable. Exclusivity isn't an awkward conversation, it happened naturally because neither of you wanted anyone else diluting what you're building. Communication has settled into a rhythm that feels like home. Good mornings arrive without prompting, voice notes land during commutes, calls bookend the day, and weekends include long, lazy hours of parallel play. You're on FaceTime while one cooks and the other works, silent company that mimics real cohabitation. Most importantly, the distance feels temporary. You've started sentences with "when one of us moves," and neither of you flinches. You argue about whose city makes more sense, whose job could transfer, whose lease ends first. The problem is no longer if but how and when. You feel chosen, pursued, and safe. The excitement is still there, but it's no longer fueled by scarcity, it's fueled by momentum. If, instead, you're still waiting for them to suggest the next trip, still guessing whether they're seeing other people, still lowering your expectations to avoid pressure, still feeling a twist in your gut every time you consider asking for more, it's over. Not dramatically, not with a fight, but quietly and definitively. You're not building a bridge, you're treading water in an ocean of maybe. Walking away at this point isn't giving up, it's reclaiming years you can't get back. Downgrade to occasional chats or cut contact entirely, but stop volunteering for a future that only exists in your head. The right person makes the distance feel like a speed bump, not a wall. Anything less is just expensive nostalgia disguised as love.